This is about chord progressions. I'm going to start with the blues today. Why start with the blues? A couple of reasons. I first started learning how to play the guitar by learning the blues. That's not the main reason, though. The main reason is that by understanding the chord progression in the blues, you are embarking on a process of analyzing chord progressions. Once you can really get a good grasp of the chord progression in the blues, then you can advance from there into more complicated chord progressions, but you'll have a good foundation for analyzing chord progressions. The blues is a really pretty simple musical form, and by understanding it, you'll be able to apply that knowledge to any other chord progression, especially in terms of what we would traditionally call ear training. That's where you listen to something and you try to figure out what it's saying musically. I guess you could equate it to understanding the meanings of words in a sentence. A sentence only makes sense to you if you understand the words that are in it. So, by understanding the steps in a chord progression of a song, you can not only understand its meaning and its progression, how it moves from one chord to another, from the beginning through to the ending, but you'll also be able to expand your ability to apply that analytical process to other more complicated chord progressions. What you see here is a 12-measure blues, but instead of alphabet note names, you see Roman numerals. Now, in music, we use Roman numerals to identify whether or not a chord is major or minor. So if the number is uppercase, then it's a major chord. If the number is lowercase, then it's a minor chord. That would only mean something to you if you understood the difference between major and minor. The difference between major and minor is that the relationship between the root and the third is what makes the chord sound major or minor. So, how does that sound? A major chord sounds like this. Okay, that's a C major, C, E, and G. If you analyze it, then there is a major third between the root, C, and the note E, which is the third. The relationship between the root and the fifth in a major or minor chord stays the same. C to G. This is how that sounds. Okay? If you use a major third in between, then you get a major chord. If you flatten the third, in other words, you make the relationship between the root and the third a minor third, in this case it would be E flat, then you would get this sound. In either case, again, the relationship between the root and the fifth stays the same, whether it's major or minor. Again, major and minor. Why is that important? That's important because you're going to apply your understanding of the sound as you look at that identifier, that Roman numeral. The hope is that you would identify a certain sound with that Roman numeral. Now we're going to get specific with these Roman numerals. Again, the 1 in the key of C is C, a C major chord. Okay? The 4 in relationship to C is F. That is also major when you harmonize the C major scale. By harmonizing, I mean if you build a chord off of each degree of the scale in the C major scale, the F turns out to have a major harmony to it. Okay? And then the 5th is G, which is also major. Okay. Now, one thing that we have in the blues is that we don't just have a series of triads. In other words, we don't just have a series of 3-note chords. We have a series of 4-note chords. The fourth note that's added on to the triad is called the 7th, and that 7th is a dominant 7th. In other words, if you harmonize the major scale, you end up with a major 7. That's the way a major 7 sounds. The major 7th has a major leading tone. It's the same as the note T when you sing the major scale in solfege. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. That leading tone is a major 7th. In the blues, we use what's called a dominant 7th. So in other words, it doesn't go T, do. It's a flattened version of T. We call that a dominant 7th. With the major 7th chord, we call it a major 7th. But with the dominant 7th chord, we drop the word dominant and just call it a C7. So when you say C major 7, that tells the player that the leading tone is B rather than B flat. A C major 7 chord has a B natural in it, that highest note there, the B, that is the major 7th. Okay? It's important to say major 7th because you don't want to say this is a C7 chord. That's not a C7, that's a C major 7. But this, when you drop the B down to B flat, then you end up with that bluesier kind of sound. All right? That's the dominant 7th, but we don't call it dominant 7th, we just call it a 7th. Now that was a lot of explanation, but it's important to know for the blues because in the blues, it's just a series of dominant 7ths. And usually a dominant 7th in classical music tells us to go to the 1. It's usually the 5. When you harmonize the 5th degree of the scale, you end up with a dominant 7th chord. In the key of C, that would be G7. And then that sound says, go to here. But in the blues, we just have a whole series of 7th chords that never really resolve. They sort of resolve, but that's what kind of gives the blues its a unique characteristic. So, the 1 in the blues is C7 with B flat. Okay? And then the 4 is F7. Okay, that's what F7 sounds like. What you're doing is you're taking that same harmony and you're moving it up a 4th, okay, to F. And then for the 5th, you just go up a whole step from the 4th. Okay, now it's starting to sound like the blues, going from the 5th to the 4th. Okay, and then you go back down to C7. Okay, now it's going to start to sound like a chord progression. So the chords in the key of C for the blues, it sounds like this. You go 1, a 2, a very simple strumming, 2, ready, go. The 1, 1, third measure first. This is the 1, and then to the 4th. For 2 measures, and we're going to go back to the 1. Then we're going to go to the 5 and go to the 4. Then go to the 1 and go to the 5. And the cycle repeats, okay? That's 12 bars. Let's do that again. I'll make it a little bit more fancy. I'll put like a little bass line in there, but you'll get the idea. it's just a cycle. It's like a month or something like that. Think of it that way, or think of a year, you know. The first quarter starts 1, a 2, a 1, 2, ready, beginning of the year. That's the 4. And back to the 1. And 5. And the 4. And back to the 1. Etc., etc. And it repeats. So now what I'm going to ask you to do this week is I'm going to ask you to look at this graphic, and you don't have to write out all the staff lines and everything like that, but I want you to write out the blues progression in the keys of G and F. And we'll see what you come up with. That should be fun.